Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is July the 10th, 191st day of the year. Just 174 days remain to the year's over with. Holidays and observances. It's National Kitten Day. Those furry little friends can make your heart melt. Big Blueberry Day. National Pina Colada Day. Chronic Disease Awareness Day. Constant health battles, unseen struggles on a daily basis. Well, this day is to help you be aware of all that. Don't Step on the Bee Day. Teddy Bear Picnic Day. Based upon the 20th century pop song, The Teddy Bear's Picnic. Global Energy Independence Day. Chronic Disease Day. Great British Pea Week. Fiesta de la Tirana. It's a celebration held in northern Chile. Transformed as a small town of La Tirana into a bustling center of energy and color and sound. Thousands of people come, fill the streets with traditional costumes and lively dances and rhythmic music. It's a festival where faith and culture blend. Creates a spectacular display of devotion and joy. It starts today and goes through the 16th. Wimbledon goes through the 13th. Rabbit Week. Running of the Bulls. You got too much time on your hand and you don't allow being run down by bovines. How would you win the running of the bulls? You got the Tour de France. Goes on through the 27th. National Transplant Week. Trans Triplets and More Week. Famous people born on this date. Nikola Tesla. Sofia Vergara. Antonio Brown. Isabella Moner. And Jessica Simpson. Well, let's see what else we got. See what stories we have in the news. Well, there's been a security fallout from the Butler assassination attempt. Secret Service suspended 6 agents who were supposed to protect President Trump during the July 2024 assassination attempt. Secret Service Deputy Director Matt Quinn said during an interview the agents' disciplinary actions ranged from 10 to 42 days of leave with no pay or benefits. In fact, the widow of the fireman killed in Butler, demanding accountability from the Secret Service. The Matt Quinn, the agency's deputy director, told CBS News they weren't going to fire their way out of this, but they did say they're laser focused on fixing the root cause of the problem. The Quinn told the news outlet the agent's penalty, as I said, ranged from 10 to 42 days of unpaid leave, and then they're placed in restricted roles with less responsibility once they return to the job. He said these disciplinary actions were in accordance with a federally mandated process. Fox News reached out to the Secret Service for independent confirmation, but didn't hear back. And there'll probably be radio silence for quite some time. The agency faced a lot of criticism after that security failure, which allowed gunman Thomas Crooks to open fire toward the Raleigh stage in Butler on July 13, 2024. Corey Camperatore, a 50-year-old firefighter, father and husband attended the rally, was killed. Trump's ear was grazed by a bullet, and 2 other men were injured by gunfire. Crooks was killed by a Secret Service sniper, so they say. Quinn said the Secret Service is totally accountable for Butler. It was an operational failure, and Secret Service is focused today on ensuring it doesn't happen again. since the Butler rally. Quinn said the Secret Service has introduced a new fleet of military-grade drones and mobile command posts to improve radio communication with local law enforcement. In the after-action report, it was determined that Secret Service did not coordinate or plan well with local law enforcement. They were the almighty feds. Well, AOC's red light district, which has been ruled by a violent migrant gang, has been taken down by the feds. Members of the 18th Street Gang were arrested in AOC's New York district. Several members of the gang were accused of unleashing terror to maintain control of the notorious crime strip, represented by progressive Democratic Representatives Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and Grace Ming. 8 members of the 18th Street Transnational Gang are accused of carrying out brutal beatings and stabbings to maintain their dominance of the Roosevelt Avenue commercial corridor in Queens. They also distributed fake passports and counterfeit currency, dealt drugs, trafficked firearms while extorting businesses for rent payments. In fact, 7 of the 8 gangbangers that were arrested are in the country illegally. All members and associates of the 18th Street Gang, formed by Mexican immigrants in Los Angeles in the 60s, and today has members throughout the U.S., as well as in Mexico and Central America. Your turf in that area spanned the 2-mile commercial strip. It had been a crime and illegal prostitution hotspot for years. Locals have likened it to a red light district or a third world flea market, given that the sidewalks are often full of women soliciting sex, as well as vendors selling all sorts of stolen or counterfeit goods and unregulated hot food as well. Fox News sent in reporters who witnessed at least 30 women soliciting sex in a 1-block area after AOC's town hall recently. Local leaders called on the FBI and the DEA to help them crack down on the criminals, who they said had turned their neighborhood into a festering gangland. And these arrests showed the FBI had heeded locals' calls, those charged being hit with various charges, including racketeering. Let's see. DeSantis, governor of Florida, made a proposal to transform Florida housing market while raising questions about alternative revenue sources. It's been called a tale of 2 Floridas. Real estate industry is torn over DeSantis' push to eliminate property taxes. You know, on the surface, not paying a property taxes does sound kind of nice. But real estate experts in Florida are a little bit at odds over the issue. Supreme Court voted 8-1 to lift a block on layoffs in the federal government as Justice Jackson stood alone. Justice Jackson shows a judicial abandon in lone dissent on Trump layoff ruling. He wants to lay off people in the federal government. Supreme Court said, okay. Well, the National Education Association passes resolutions attacking Trump parental rights while rejecting focus on student learning. They're more concerned with politics than they are about educating your children. The National Education Association, or the NEA, is the nation's largest teachers union, had its annual convention in Portland, Oregon, and revealed itself to be a brazenly political organization, far from prioritizing the education of workers' children. His agenda was a parade of partisan resolutions and misspelled attacks on political opponents, and a clear sign it's aligned with the far left wing of the Democratic Party. The tone was set by Ashley Crossan, the 2025 Teacher of the Year. She said on July 4th, her job is deeply political and always has been. When she realized how deeply political her profession has always been, she knew she couldn't stay on the sidelines anymore. So what if Johnny can't read and write? As long as he votes Democrat, everybody's happy. Well, Trump just scored the biggest conservative victory in 30 years. Legislation ends EV mandates and strengthens work requirements for welfare recipients while averting a $4 trillion tax increase. The big beautiful bill that everybody keeps talking about, which was signed into law on July 4th, lowers the tax burdens for families and businesses, averts a $4 trillion tax increase starting next year. But what isn't well known is that the new law doesn't just change the tax policy, it includes dozens of other long-sought policy goals being referred to by those in the know as hidden gems. It's the most aggressive federal advancement of school choice. It allows low-income parents to direct education dollars to private, charter, or Catholic schools that work better for their kids. Expands eligibility for personalized medical savings accounts instead of conventional insurance. Lets workers control their healthcare dollars. Increases mining and drilling on federal lands to increase access to America's natural resource supplies. Ends our dependence on the Middle East or China or Russia. Ends the absurd Biden student loan forgiveness program, which forced taxpayers to swallow the cost of unpaid college loans. Ends the electric vehicle mandate, phases out the Green New Deal, allows Americans to buy whatever kind of car they want. Expands opportunity zones, extends tax benefits for investing in inner cities and economically depressed rural areas. Increases the tax to 8% on the $1 trillion of bloated university endowments. Money that was never taxed. Strengthens work requirements for Medicaid and food stamp recipients. Authorizes sale of expanded spectrum to strengthen rural broadband, secure America's technological dominance. Reduces the national debt by almost $100 billion. I mean, there's a lot in this bill that the Democrats fought tooth and nail to stop. Well, archaeologists have uncovered a mysterious Christian settlement that's been hidden for centuries. They uncovered church ruins and mosaics and artifacts at a site believed to be a long-lost settlement. It's the remains of a long-forgotten Byzantine settlement. Salam al-Raini, an associate professor of archaeology at Buta University in Jordan, published the findings in the journal Kefraya in May. He believes he's uncovered the ancient site of Tereus, guided by the enigmatic Adama map, a remarkable mosaic that's puzzled historians for centuries. In an interview, he said he located the site near the Jordanian village of El Iraq, an area known as An al-Qala. While the site was lost to obscurity, the historian said the once thriving settlement was located strategically along trade routes to the southeast Dead Sea region. He said he and his team uncovered artifacts ranging from pottery shards and stone tools to glass remnants. Uncovered fossils also. Areas filled with architectural remains, including a Byzantine church. When asked what was the most interesting find at the site, he pointed to several discoveries, including the Christian church and an olive oil press. church, which the historian called basilical style, retained fragments of mosaic floors typical of Byzantine Christian sites. Found various inscriptions which he said were linked to ancient funerary practices. Well, when asked why it was lost in the first place, he said the site was abandoned by the 7th century AD based on what archaeologists learned from activity in that area. He said there were changes in trade routes, earthquakes, and environmental changes. And he said the area transitioned from Byzantine to Islamic control in the 7th century. The Byzantine Empire, for those that are not familiar with it, was originally the Eastern Roman Empire. Lasted from 330 AD to the 15th century. Constantine the Great moved the Roman capital to Byzantium, which he renamed Constantinople. And when the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the empire was ruled from Constantinople. Well, construction workers were brought to safety after the Los Angeles Industrial Tunnel collapsed. The mayor praised the true heroes after the 30-plus construction workers escaped the partially collapsed $700 million tunnel project. Yes, instead of using that money to take care of the citizens of LA, they've been pouring it in a hole in the ground, which is typical of the Democrats. Yep. Let's see. This is day 3 of Amazon Prime Day. Brings the latest deals and ever available at discounted prices from Amazon Prime. There have been quite a number of very fascinating items offered over the last 3 days. Once again, my system is spinning in circles. Yeah. NASA sent a specialized aircraft and technology to aid the Texas flood search and recovery operations. High altitude WB-57 and UAV SAR technology was deployed to accelerate emergency response after the 4th of July disaster. Right now, the floods have claimed 119 lives and nearly 200 people are still missing. Well, Jeffrey Epstein died, and frankly, the jury is still out on whether he committed suicide or was murdered. Circumstances were so bizarre that instantly conspiracy theories were hatched as to who killed him and why. With how they made it into a cell disguised the murder as a suicide. Now, the only thing they know for sure is he's dead. And from that beginning, all the conspiracy theories began. Millions of hours have been wasted in chat rooms and podcasts talking about it. There's a DOJ memo that's been revealed that he died by suicide. There was no client list, even though there have been reams written about his client list. Still, facts to come out on that. Well, Johnny Depp has said F you to Hollywood as Amber Heard allegations about abuse derail his career. He fought back against the career-threatening allegations despite being told he was crazy. In this particular view of the world, allegations against a man is automatic guilt. Well, he won his defamation suit against Amber Heard in 2022 after she labeled herself a domestic abuse victim in a Washington Post opinion article. The legal battle threatened to completely ruin Depp's Hollywood career. After the Pirates of the Caribbean star lost a libel case in the UK, he dropped from the Harry Potter spinoff Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. He filmed one scene and he got replaced. Well, he explained he chose to fight back against Heard's allegations were driven to be one of the most watched celebrity trials. He said he fought because if he hadn't, he wouldn't have been him. Heard's lie became a deciding factor in whether he could continue to make movies. Well, a mother of 5 has fought tech addiction as the study shows screens shrink children's brains. There's always a study showing something. Michigan homeschool mother of 5 reveals how outdoor time transformed her parenting. She prescribed for her and her family 1,000 hours outdoor. That's the goal of a homeschool mother of 5. Michigan mother Jenny Urich, who has a master's in education. That's a dangerous thing right there. Spoke with Fox News about her work and inspiring families turn off screens, spend more times outdoor and away from technology. She's founded a program called 1,000 Hours Outside. She says her work is meant to bring back the balance between real life and virtual life. This is completely needed right now. The average kid in America is outside for 4 to 7 minutes a day, but spends 47 hours on the screen. So we'll see how all that plays out. And let's see. Prime Day 3, you get 50% off men's work boots, pants, and other essential gear. The Trump administration is blocking CCP land purchases in the U.S. They're buying up land around military bases. A federal judge has deemed former Chicago alderman accused of bribery unfit for trial. 76-year-old ex-alderman's health condition is deemed incompatible with courtroom proceedings in a federal bribery case. Chicago mayor has vowed the city police will never cooperate with ICE in total opposition to federal law. Carrie Austin's her name. She was indicted by a federal grand jury in 2021 for conspiring to receive home improvements from construction contractors seeking city assistance for a development project. She spent nearly 30 years on the Chicago City Council before resigning in 2023. She pled not guilty. Well, Chicago's a mess. Always has been. James Carville wants Mamdani to keep globalize the Intifada phrase out of his mouth. A lot of the writings they're finding from Mamdani's past shows he's a radical socialist. We don't need that in the government. Well, the Ukrainian U.S. ambassador, seen with holding his head in his hands during an Oval Office meeting, is being sent home. Republicans call for Markarova's removal after she hosted a partisan event favoring Democrats in a battleground state. Elon Musk is apparently starting his own political party. We'll see how that goes. Experts, everybody's an expert, say food is medicine, and this movement may be the key to reversing health decline. More nutrient-dense foods may help combat chronic diseases, according to experts. One of the things they're saying is tropical fruit could be the answer to better heart health. And they warn that current U.S. agricultural output is insufficient to support a healthy population. Medicaid's going to undergo significant changes due to the bill that was just signed by President Trump on the 4th. Gold medalist Ryan Locke maintains he didn't cheat on his wife Kayla. Never wanted to get a divorce. Well, he's got one. A 21-year-old fisherman caught a shark and tried to turn it loose, and the shark turned on him. No justice sometimes. Let's see. Elon Musk AI chatbot Grok went on an anti-Semitic tirade. Experts say hypnosis may support alcohol use disorder treatment, but it's not a cure. A belly dancer was arrested at the Cairo airport for being too sexy. Now, let's see, is anything else? It's been determined nuclear power is coming out as the key solution for America's rapidly growing AI tech energy crisis. Well, that ends our news segment. Let's turn to our topic, which is little known secrets. We talked a little bit yesterday about the Kalachi Sleepy Hollow mystery. It's a Kazakhstan village that between 2013 and 2015, it was known as the village it couldn't stay awake. Now, it's a small remote village known as Kalachi in northern Kazakhstan. And some strange things were happening in 2013. Entire families would suddenly fall into a deep, unshakable sleep. Sometimes they'd sleep for days at a time. Children would pass out at school. Farmers would collapse in their fields. Some residents woke up with no memory, severe hallucinations, or chronic fatigue that lasted for weeks. Now, locals called it the sleeping sickness, but the media gave Kalachi a more haunting name, I guess you could say. Kazakhstan's Sleepy Hollow. Despite years of official investigation and media coverage, the true cause was never proven. A lot of villagers believe they were the subject of a secret testing or government cover-up. Now, the first known mass sleeping episode took place in March of 2013. 6 villagers suddenly fell unconscious for no clear reason. They were rushed to the hospital in nearby Isl. Doctors found no neurological abnormalities, no trauma, no traces of toxins or drugs. But then it happened again. By early 2014, dozens more had experienced similar symptoms, fell asleep in broad daylight. hallucinating, slurring their speech, experiencing intense vertigo or memory loss when they woke up. Some stayed unconscious for up to 6 days. It wasn't just one or two people. In some of the episodes, entire classrooms or households were all struck down at once. Between 2013 and 2015, over 150 residents, nearly a quarter of the population, experienced the condition at least once, and some suffered it several times. Initially, local and national officials denied there was any pattern. As international media got the story, Kazakhstan's government was forced to act. They sent in teams of doctors and scientists and radiation specialists to Kalachi. And what did they find? After the expenditure of time, energy, and money, 2015, the government claimed the cause was carbon monoxide and hydrocarbon poisoning from nearby abandoned uranium mine in a neighboring village of Krasnogorsk. Soviet mining operations there had ceased in the 1990s, and they said the decaying shafts were leaking gases that accumulated under Kalachi during the thaw cycles. But this explanation actually raised more questions than it answered. First, while the CO levels within legally acceptable limits in every single sample recorded, why does sickness affect some homes and not others, even in the same row of houses? Why did the animals and livestock remain unaffected, despite being in that same environment? Well, the government researchers eventually concluded the village was safe, but out of an abundance of caution, it needed to be evacuated. What many said was an odd contradiction. 2016, Kalachi was officially shut down. Most of its residents relocated under state programs. But those who remained and those that already suffered were skeptical about this solution. A lot of villagers began voicing a chilling suspicion. They claimed they'd been the subject of a covert experiment. Nadezhda Petrova, a retired nurse, told Radio Free Europe, "We were tested on like rats. They came, they took samples, but didn't tell us anything. And then they said it was gas. If that were true, but it affected everybody the same." She said her goat lived with her. Goat didn't faint once. Some claim military trucks and unmarked scientific equipment have been seen entering Kalachi during the night. Independent journalists trying to document the phenomena were quite often denied access to government findings and told records have been sealed for security purposes. And adding to the mystery, similar symptoms never reported in other villages. There are uranium mines across Kazakhstan. Well, despite international interest, no peer-reviewed study has ever been released with conclusive proof of the gas theory. Now, what's a peer-reviewed study? Scientist A says it's true, and Scientist B confirms Scientist A. That's a peer-reviewed study. Independent scientists asked for raw geological, biological data or told that records are classified or lost. In other words, if you didn't get on the bandwagon, you couldn't play. 2018, a group of German geologists attempted to revisit the mine, only to be denied access by local authorities despite having government permits. And meanwhile, medical records of long-term effects on affected villagers were never published, despite hundreds of tests and scans conducted during the outbreak. Several villagers later reported neurological decline, short-term memory loss, and mood changes. Uranium mine named Krasnogorsk 177 was later revealed to have been part of a Soviet-era strategic resource operation, with a lot of the Cold War documents about that operation still under seal in Moscow and Astana. Well, unlike other health-related disasters, the Kalachi case has never been given a full transparency. And there's reasons why this mysteries remain mostly untalked about. Number one, the mine's Soviet military ties likely entangled the incident in post-Cold War secrecy agreements. Kazakhstan's government was undergoing international economic negotiations at that time. Openly revealing a potential nuclear-linked public health disaster would have been politically and economically disastrous. And the small size and remote location of Kalachi made it very easy to downplay and eventually dissolve public interest. Now, Kalachi's sleeping village didn't just drift into history. It was removed, evacuated, archived, forgotten. And with it went all records that might have brought answers. Well, whether it was toxic gas, military experimentation, psychological warfare, or a geological anomaly, is still unknown. But there are a number of questions that have never been answered. How does an entire village fall asleep and nobody stays awake long enough to tell the truth? Which is a question, A, nobody wants to ask in authority, and B, nobody wants to answer. Well, it's long been said that the Vatican has secret archives. And there's one secret file within these secret archives that has fascinated a lot of people. The Chronovisor files talks about time travel and the church and the machine that was never meant to exist. It all began in the 1960s. A Benedictine monk and respected Vatican exorcist named Father Pellegrino Ernetti claimed to have worked on one of the most extraordinary inventions ever conceived. A machine capable of viewing past events, literally. He called it the Chronovisor, and according to him, it could tune into electromagnetic residue of time itself. It allowed its user to see and hear moments from the past, from ancient Rome to the crucifixion of Christ. Now, while this sounds like science fiction or religious myth, the story gained credibility over the years due to multiple witnesses and specific technical claims, and most chillingly, leaked Vatican correspondence referencing a device the church has never publicly acknowledged. But then again, it's never denied it either. Now, Father Ernetti was not a fringe figure. He was a musicologist professor at the prestigious Benedetto Marcello Conservatory in Venice. According to him, the Chronovisor project began in the early 1950s. Developed in a secret collaboration with a small team of scientists and clergy. Among those scientists was Enrico Fermi, father of nuclear age, and Werner von Braun, former Nazi rocket scientist turned NASA pioneer. Now, what was the premise? Every sound and image in the universe leaves behind a physical trace, encoded in the vibration of space. And with precise tuning, this information can be retrieved by playing a record backwards in time. By 1956, according to Ernetti, this machine was operational. Now, the Chronovisor originally looked like a large cabinet of cathode ray tubes, dials, and levers, antenna and rare metals designed to pick up lingering signals of time. And through it, Ernetti claimed to have witnessed the performance of a now-lost tragedy, the Yestes by Quentin Aeneas, performed in ancient Rome, a private speech by Napoleon, the death of Christ, complete with sound and visual evidence. He even produced a Latin transcript of Triestis, previously believed to be lost for over 1,700 years. Linguists have debated its authenticity for decades. In 1972, an Italian newspaper published a photo Ernetti allegedly took from the Chronovisor showing Christ on the cross. That image later appeared nearly identical to a known sculptor in an Umbrian church, prompting the skeptics to dismiss that photo as a fabrication. But Ernetti never recanted his story. In the early 2000s, journalist Francois Brunet, French priest and author, revealed he had spoken personally with Ernetti about the Chronovisor for years. And according to Brunet, Ernetti said the Vatican had forced the dismantling of the device and classified its components as state secrets, fearing the machine could become a threat to both political and spiritual stability. Brunei later claimed to have seen Vatican documents and memos referencing una machina for la visión del pasado, a machine for seeing the past. There's a translation of that. Brunei requests from church officials for internal assessments for its theological consequences. Now, the Vatican never issued an official statement on the Chronovisor, despite repeated requests from historians and journalists. But in 1988, the church issued a peculiar warning in the Acta Apostolica Sedis, its official bulletin. It said a person using an instrument of this kind will be excommunicated. There was no context to that statement. No machine was named, but to a lot of folks, it was a quiet confirmation of something never meant to be known. Why forbid you to use something that they say doesn't exist? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Well, further, Ahnenerbe died in 1994. On his deathbed, some claim he signed a confession that Chronovisor was a hoax. Others, like Brunei and members of Ahnenerbe's monastery, insist no such confession was ever witnessed, and a supposed statement appeared mysteriously after his death. Curiously, his personal notes and lab materials and unpublished manuscripts all vanished from his residence within 48 hours of his death, allegedly taken by church agents. There was never any investigation. Now, modern scientists, of course, remain skeptical. The physics of capturing sound and light from the past would require a mechanism for detecting and decoding exponentially scattered particles. That's a technology, they say, is far beyond any known capability. But if the Estes manuscript does remain partially undeciphered, Brunei's reports of Vatican records remain unrefuted. Excommunication warnings exist in official church archives. Again, why forbid something that doesn't exist? And nobody, no Vatican official or church scientist ever definitively denied Ahnenerbe's involvement in the project. The Chronovisor story isn't just about time travel or Vatican secrets. It's about what institutions do with knowledge that challenges their control. Did Father Ahnenerbe and his team tap into a hidden layer of reality? Or did they spend their time creating an elaborate hoax to provoke questions nobody dared ask? Whatever the truth might be, the Vatican's ensured nobody will ever build a Chronovisor again. That is, unless somebody already has. Well, from the Vatican, let's turn to Southeast Asia in the 70s and 80s. The so-called Yellow Rain controversy. In the years after we withdrew from Vietnam and the collapse of South Vietnam in 1975, the communist government gained control of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And this, of course, led to mass persecutions of ethnic minorities, particularly the Hmong people of Laos, many of whom served alongside U.S. forces during the Vietnam War. Fleeing political retribution, tens of thousands of Hmong refugees fled to Thailand and other neighboring regions. And it was during this exodus that a lot of strange and deadly reports began to surface. Refugees consistently described unmarked aircraft or helicopters that flew over and released a yellow, sticky, powdery substance over villages and jungle hideouts. Survivors claimed that soon after exposure, people experienced intense sickness, vomiting, seizures, bleeding, skin blisters, blindness, in some cases even death. And these were not isolated reports by any means. Over 6,000 cases of alleged chemical attacks are collected from Southeast Asia between the late 1970s and early 1980s. Now, alarmed by consistent testimonies, the U.S. government launched a series of investigations. In 1981, Secretary of State Alexander Haig made a formal accusation at the UN. He accused the Soviet Union and its allies of using chemical weapons in Southeast Asia in violation of the 1925 Geneva Protocol. This marked one of the Cold War's most serious allegations of direct chemical warfare outside of open battlefield use. This substance, which became known as yellow rain, the term popularized primarily in Western media, U.S. collected environmental samples, conducted interviews of refugees, and examined autopsy results of the deceased. Some tests did appear to detect colchicine mycotoxins, a group of fungal toxins that are highly lethal and could theoretically be used as chemical weapons. But most of the powerful pieces of evidence came from direct witness statements. General Vang Powell, exiled Hmong leader and former CIA-backed guerrilla commander, testified before U.S. Congress in 1982 that chemical attacks are being systematically used to eliminate his people. There were numerous refugees that were interviewed and recorded by human rights groups and journalists that included stories of entire families dying from exposure to the yellow mist. They're describing it's falling like rain from above. Medical teams that treated refugees in Thailand documented neurological damage and unexplained internal hemorrhaging consistent with toxic exposure. Although no videos or photographic evidence existed, because remember, these were remote locations and Oman didn't have the technology to record it. The volume and consistency of refugee reports actually was strong circumstantial credibility. And beginning in 1983, a lot of critics of the biological warfare theory, led by biologist Matthew Mestery of Harvard University. Oh, man, he's from Harvard. Whatever he says goes, of course. But they began challenging the U.S. narrative. He and his team visited Laos and collected their own samples. And they came up with their own conclusions. The yellow droplets found on vegetation were not toxic weapons, they were bee droppings. Oh yes, bees are fighting back and killing people. Specifically, the phenomenon was attributed to mass defecation flights by giant Asian honeybees, the Apis dorsata, which travel in large swarms and can release yellow fecal material while in flight. And these flights, according to Matthew Mestery, can create widespread yellow rain that sticks to leaves and looks similar to chemical residue. He argued that the presence of mycotoxins in some U.S. samples could have come from environmental contamination, not from deliberate weaponization. And the mere fact that it was dumped out of helicopters, that's just circumstantial. Controversy reached deep into intelligence and diplomatic circles. Declassified CIA and State Department memos from the 80s revealed the U.S. is internally divided. Some analysts believed refugee reports were credible and reflected deliberate attacks, especially given patterns that seemed targeted and strategically timed. Others, of course, worried that scientific evidence was too shaky and feared that incorrect accusations could damage U.S. credibility during a sensitive Cold War standoff. In fact, one internal cable from 1983 said it very clearly: we risk embarrassing ourselves if our science can't withstand scrutiny. But ignoring the testimony of thousands of victims is equally perilous. Well, despite the lack of full scientific consensus, the U.S. maintained its public stance, accusing the Soviets and their allies, but quietly backed off after the media backlash and scientific disputes grew louder. Leading the charge, of course, was CNN. To this day, there's been no conclusive answer. There are two dominant narratives that do remain. Number one, a real covert chemical warfare campaign was used against ethnic minorities in Laos and Cambodia, one that was deliberately buried and discredited. And the second one is a massive misinterpretation of natural phenomena, magnified by trauma and cultural gaps and Cold War paranoia. And all this came together to create a myth built on tragic coincidences. What is certain is that the Hmong people endured extraordinary suffering, and their testimonies, whether interpreted through politics, science, or survivor memory, remains deeply powerful. Now, you don't hear much about this story, and there's several reasons for that. Number one is no clear smoking gun, no captured weapon, no document, no physical proof definitively tied to a government program. Of course, there's Cold War politics. Both the U.S. and the USSR had incentive to push or discredit the story, which of course muddied the water. And there's scientific ambiguity. Disagreements among the experts undermined trust on either side. And there's ethnic marginalization. The voices of Hmong are often seen as politically convenient, but not always treated with the dignity of independent truth. Well, if you want to check out the references, there are U.S. Department of State declassified memos from 81 to 85, testimonies collected by Amnesty International and Southeast Asian refugee support groups. In 1982, there was congressional hearings where you had the testimony of General Vang Pao and Hmong community leaders. On the other hand, you had Matthew Nesselson and Julian Perry's and Robinson's field research publications. PBS Frontline did a 1984 documentary called Yellow Rain, and Harvard Kennedy School Cold War Archive on U.S. biological warfare allegations is available to check out. Now, the Yellow Rain controversy isn't about what can be seen under a microscope. It's about what happens when science and suffering and geopolitics collide, and when nobody agrees on what the truth actually might be. Well, from Southeast Asia, let's go to Tibet. The Ahnenerbe's hidden Tibetan archive. Nazi Germany sent a secret expedition to uncover the origins of the so-called master race. It was 1938, under the looming shadow of war. Nazi Germany sent a scientific expedition to one of the most remote and politically neutral regions on Earth, Tibet. The team consisted of anthropologists, zoologists, and SS officers. It was dispatched by the Ahnenerbe, mysterious Nazi research division founded by Heinrich Himmler. Their stated mission was scientific exploration. The actual objective, to uncover the mystical and racial origins of what the Nazis believed to be the Aryan master race. This journey was funded and supervised by the SS. Leading the team was Ernst Schaefer, German zoologist and SS member with prior Himalayan experience. With him was Bruno Beger, a racial anthropologist, Kurt Weiner, the geophysicist, and Edmund Gear, technical photographer. And this wasn't your ordinary scientific trip. Part of a broader Nazi obsession with occultism and pseudoscience and ancient civilizations, all wrapped up in what was referred to as racial ideology. Tibet, long rumored to house esoteric wisdom and ancient secrets, was seen as a potential crater of Aryan ancestry. Now, the Ahnenerbe, which was actually, the real name is actually the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society, was founded in 1935 by Himmler, who believed history and mythology and archaeology could be weaponized to justify the Nazi ideology. The Ahnenerbe conducted expeditions and experiments throughout Europe and beyond, often cloaked in scientific language, but driven by racial mysticism and political goals. And there were several goals for the Tibet mission. Number one, proving Tibetans were descendants of early Aryan people, collecting ancient texts and religious manuscripts with esoteric knowledge, mapping geological and astronomical alignments connected to ancient wisdom, investigated Buddhist rituals for connections to universal Aryan spirituality, and searching for lost civilizations or Atlantis-like myths connected with Germanic folklore. Himmler believed the original Aryan race had once ruled vast portions of the ancient world, possibly from a long-lost Arctic or Himalayan homeland, and Tibet could hold the remnants of that lost past. Well, the team departed Germany in April of 1938, journeying through British-controlled India, being watched, of course, very closely by British intelligence, arrived in Tibet by late summer. And the Tibetan government allowed them to stay for several months, which was considered a rare concession. During their stay, the team measured and photographed hundreds of Tibetans using calipers to record skull sizes and facial features, which was typical of Nazi racial research at the time. They collected religious artifacts, ritual items, ancient scrolls, some of which were shipped back to Berlin. Conducted zoological and botanical studies, including rare animal species and high-altitude survival adaptations. Originally mapped certain high-altitude areas not previously surveyed, possibly using coded notations and hidden markers. While most of the scientific materials were claimed to be focused on zoology and anthropology, There were a number of coded references to esoteric symbols and myths that were embedded in expedition documents. Well, by the end of 1939, the team had returned to Germany, and some of their findings were cataloged with Ahnenerbe and used in Nazi propaganda, claiming support for the idea of Aryan superiority and ancient Germanic dominance. Not surprisingly, most of the expedition's records vanished at the end of World War II, but some did remain. A series of coded maps and terrain surveys marked with ruins and unexplainable symbols. Photographic documentation of artifacts and rituals, some of which now reside in obscure archives. Untranslated manuscripts taken from remote monasteries. Bruno Beger's anthropological notes, including charts linking Tibetan skull shapes to European racial classifications. And a handful of Tibetan artifacts confiscated by Allied forces or hidden in private European collections. According to classified Allied intelligence reports, a lot of the materials were either lost in bombings or deliberately destroyed by SS officers attempting to hide evidence of Ahnenerbe's pseudo-scientific pursuits. But rumors did persist that a sealed archive of Tibetan-related materials was hidden in southern Germany and relocated to Argentina alongside fleeing SS elites. Among the evidence was post-war interrogations of captured SS officers that confirmed that some documents from the Tibetan expedition were considered strategic ideological assets by Himmler himself. In 1947, U.S. intelligence operatives working under Operation Paperclip recorded certain Ahnenerbe files referenced Oriental spiritual power and racial cartography, and had been marked as classified and volatile. Some photos from the 1938 expedition resurfaced in 2002 in private auctions, showing Schaefer's team performing rituals and posing with Tibetan lamas. Survivors from German scientific circles later admitted the Tibetan mission had unspoken objectives, primarily seeking confirmation of racial origin myths and ancient wisdom of supposed Aryan forebears. So you might ask yourself, why didn't the public know about all this? Why it doesn't fit the mold of a sci-fi conspiracy. The Tibetan expedition is a case study in how totalitarian regimes bend science to ideology and how the most bizarre missions can have real documented trails that get lost in wartime collapse. Much of the material that survived was filed away in Cold War intelligence archives, especially as Allied agencies feared occult Nazism could reemerge in post-war movements. And post-war Germany had little incentive to publicize a government-backed search for magical Aryan ancestors. Now, if you want to go research, there are certain sources and archives. Ernest Schaefer's official reports that Ahnenerbe have been found in Berlin archives. Bruno Beger's anthropological logs were partially declassified in the 1990s. The U.S. OSS and State Department intelligence briefs on Nazi expeditions can be found at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. There was an academic study done in 2003 called Himmler's Tibet. It was written by Christopher Hale. And there were British colonial dispatches monitoring a German team in Indian Tibet that can be found in the UK National Archives. And there are a lot of recovered photographs from the expedition held by private collectors and featured in various exhibitions. Now, the Ahnenerbe's 1938 Tibetan expedition wasn't just another tale of Nazi strangeness. It was a real documented mission with photographs, physical evidence, and geopolitical implications. Blended the darkest parts of ideology with the most ancient dreams of human origin, and its legacy continues to echo in widespread and whispered stories and fragmented files and buried archives. It's a secret, not because nobody remembers it, but because nobody was ever supposed to understand what the Nazis were actually looking for. On that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow. And once again, you'll be listening to Ken Hudnall, the Ken Hudnall Show. Until then, have a truly great evening.